is coming. Take me down. Hand me over. I know my time has come. Home is drifting. Can't find you. Can't find nothing. I lost the way I knew. Now I see the light and I feel it warm and bright. It's calling me to come. Now I see the light and I feel it warm and bright. It's calling me, don't fight. Coming to the light. Storm is coming. Melt me down. Break my last one. I know my time has come. Now I see the light and I feel it warm and bright. It's calling me to come. Now I see the light and I feel it warm and bright. It's calling me, don't fight. Come to the light.
Der Mensch hat schon immer nach vorne geschaut, über den Horizont hinaus, hinter die nächste Küste, bis in die Tiefen des Weltalls. Aber was suchen wir dort draußen eigentlich? Neue Rohstoffe oder ein neues Selbstverständnis? Für diese Folge trafen wir im Jahr 2014 David Gump, Unternehmer, Pionier, ehemaliger Mitbegründer von Deep Space Industries. Ein Unternehmen, das sich nicht weniger vorgenommen hatte, als das Weltall zu erschließen. Nicht mit Großprojekten für ferne Generationen, sondern mit konkreten Technologien, kleinen Raumsonden, die Asteroiden erkunden, Wasser extrahieren, Metalle analysieren, das sogenannte Asteroid Mining. Die Zukunft, die Deep Space Industries skizzierte, war nicht futuristisch im Sinne der Science Fiction. Sie war technisch durchdacht, wirtschaftlich kalkuliert und zutiefst menschlich motiviert. Ein Gedanke, der schon lange vor Deep Space Industries existierte. Die Idee, den Weltraum nicht nur mit Sonnenlicht zu durchqueren, sondern mit der Kraft des Uran. Schon in den 1960er Jahren trieb das Element nicht nur Reaktoren auf der Erde an, sondern auch die ersten Visionen nuklearer Raumfahrt. Projekte wie NERVA oder SNAP machten es zum Hoffnungsträger für interplanetare Energieversorgung. Auch heute sind nukleare Reaktoren für die Raumfahrt in Entwicklung und nutzen Miniaturbrennstoffe, sogenannte Coated Particles oder Trisoparticles. Auch wenn Deep Space Industries selbst mit Uran nie gearbeitet hat, der Gedanke blieb Teil einer größeren Erzählung von Energie, Verantwortung und Fortschritt im All. Deep Space Industries, das Unternehmen, das einst antrat, praktische Lösungen für das All zu entwickeln, gibt es heute nicht mehr. Doch die Fragen, die es aufwarf, sind geblieben. Wie eine Einladung weiterzudenken über Eigentum, über Verantwortung und über unseren Platz im Universum. Auch die deutsche Raumfahrt ist heute Teil des internationalen Aufbruchs mit kleinen Satelliten, kommerziellen Starts, neuen Standorten. Der Zugang zum All ist nicht länger exklusiv, sondern wird zum geteilten Projekt. Denn wenn wir anfangen, Rohstoffe im All zu fördern, stellen wir uns nicht nur technischen, sondern auch ethischen Fragen. Wer darf was besitzen? Niemals Land zwischen den Sternen. Welche Gesellschaftsformen können dort Bestand haben, wo kein Nationalstaat mehr greift? Und was lernen wir über uns selbst, wenn wir anfangen, andere Himmelskörper zu verändern? Unser Gespräch mit David Gump führt von den Visionen privater Raumfahrt hin zu einer Philosophie der Zukunft. Wir sprachen nicht nur über Technologie, sondern über mögliche Zivilisationen, über Eigentum, über Vertrauen und vielleicht sogar über Frieden. Gibt es Fortschritt ohne Risiko? Und wohin führt uns der Wunsch, alles noch einmal ganz von vorne zu denken? Irgendwo dort draußen, im schwarzen Nichts. Willkommen zu einer Reise durch Technik, Träume und tiefere Fragen. Hi David, let's start with a short intro. Tell me something about you and your work.
Well, I've been working for commercial space for the last 2.5 decades. I got interested in this when I was a publisher of technical newsletters. We were publishing newsletters about the business of space, about military space, and this was at the beginning of the space shuttle era. It was 1983 and the shuttle was just beginning to fly, and all the predictions were it was going to bring down costs, it was going to fly twice a month, it was going to open up space for economic activity. And as it turned out, obviously, the shuttle was a economic disaster. It was technically so-so. It had two human disasters. And so as I wrote about NASA and the shuttle and space enterprise in the mid-'80s, it was really clear that the government just wasn't able to bring down costs and to broaden economic activity in space. And so I began to write editorials for newspapers. I wrote a book called Space Enterprise. And it became clear that writing wasn't going to solve anything, so I started a company called Lunacorp. And I've been in the entrepreneurial space business ever since, trying to get non-government money into the field so that people could make different decisions. There's a saying that the golden rule is that he who has the gold makes the rules. And if the government is the only one spending money in space, then it's the government rules for how you do space. So I've been able to bring in some modest amounts of corporate sponsorship money and media money to do things that governments just either won't do or can't do. And now we have the wonderful situation where there are several billionaires like Elon Musk and Paul Allen and Jeff Bezos pouring their own money into building new launch vehicles with different philosophies of design. And in the case of Elon Musk, we've seen, Elon's private spaceship docking with the International Space Station. So there's been a great deal of change, and that's brought down prices. And that reduced prices are what will help make humanity's expansion into the solar system sustainable. You know, the Apollo program was a tremendous technical achievement. They got to the moon using almost punched cards for computers, but it was done at such enormous cost it just stopped. It couldn't be done again. Now the hope is that there'll be great new advances, but at a price level that means they can be sustained. There can be not only the first footsteps on Mars, but additional footsteps on Mars, and people actually deciding to go there to live. People on one-way trips, like when the North American continent was settled, most people who came to North America were on a one-way trip. They had no intention or even ability to return home. They committed to the frontier. So what Deep Space Industries is doing is the next step beyond low-cost launch. We will try to make operating in space less expensive by utilizing the resources that you can find in space. If you go to the site asterrank.com, you can pull up a simulation of the near-Earth asteroids. And you can basically see that there are literally millions of asteroids that are in roughly the same orbit as the Earth around the Sun. So we will give some of those a slight nudge and bring their material, which includes water to for life support and water to turn into propellant and get those locally instead of trying to launch them to the ground.
Was it easy to fund this company or too complicated because it costs a lot of money?
It's a challenge to create any company, and it's a double challenge to create a space company. Most investors have never even considered investing in a space company. Other things are more familiar. You know, if you propose to open up a donut shop, people have eaten donuts, they know what donuts are. They've purchased donuts themselves personally, whereas with space, very few people have any personal experience. They don't have any way to judge these things. On the other hand, that is changing now. People can see Elon Musk making a tremendous success out of SpaceX. Hopefully when Virgin Galactic and X-Corps start flying wealthy people into suborbital space this year, more and more of those folks will have personally experienced space and will become potential investors in space companies. So things are changing, but it's still a challenge because in the past, in the 20th century, if you said the word space to someone, their immediate thought would be NASA. NASA does everything in space. Or B, billions of dollars, because anything in space costs billions of dollars. We are, raising just $3.5 million right now in our seed round, and perhaps about $12 million in our Series A. So, a total of about $15 million is all we need to get our first round of prospecting spacecraft sent out to asteroids. So we don't need billionaires to invest in us. We don't need centimillionaires. We can get by with decamillionaires or single-digit millionaires who want to put some of their wealth into a longer-term bet that will pay off in a relatively short amount of time.
What is the actual status quo of your work?
Right now, we are designing our initial prospecting spacecraft. These are based on the CubeSat standard. CubeSats are basically 10 centimeter by 10 centimeter cubes. Several hundred have been released into low Earth orbit, either in the one cube format or some are 3 cubes together. To do asteroid work, they need some new capabilities. They need to have propulsion added to them. The ones that have been flown so far don't have propulsion. And they need better communications capabilities, because instead of communicating over a few hundred miles from low Earth orbit down to a ground station, they may need to communicate over, a million miles as they're out prospecting in an asteroid. But those are the kinds of spacecraft that we're designing. They are small enough to fit into a large briefcase, like a lawyer's briefcase. And because they're small, they do not cost very much to build. The parts costs can be $1 million or $2, even after they're upgraded to have propulsion and comm. And because they're small, they can be launched as hitchhikers, ride-along payloads on the launch of a large communication satellite. And the fee to do that is sometimes $1 or $2 million. So you can have a very capable, very important spacecraft built and launched for less than $10 million. And that's a tremendous breakthrough for deep space exploration. And that kind of price level is what we'll pay for going out to do the first phase, which is prospecting at asteroids to find out what actually is their content, what really is their structure. Are they rubble piles like most theory predicts, or are they solid? The only photographs we have of asteroids up close are of things about 500 meters and larger. And we don't really know from photographic proof what the smaller ones, the 300 meter or 100 meter or 50 meter sizes, whether they are rubble piles or solid. We would prefer rubble piles because they're easier to pluck things off and bring them home. If they're solid monoliths, that makes them harder to gather material and bring them back to Earth orbit.
Which resources can we find in space?
The most valuable resource that we can get at asteroids would be water. Most asteroids are left over from the formation of the solar system. They are the building blocks that planets were made from. And those are 10 to 20% water by mass. And those very same asteroids are 10 to 20% metal particles by mass. Most of those asteroids are far richer in metals than most Earth, most terrestrial mines. So from that water, we can split it into hydrogen and oxygen and get rocket fuel. Many asteroids also have hydrocarbons, methane and other things that also can be turned into rocket fuel. And that's one of the primary things that you need in space. You need to get from where you are to some other place. Or if you're in, say, low Earth orbit, like the International Space Station and the private space stations that are being planned, you have to have additional fuel to raise your orbit, because at 300 to 400 kilometers, there's still just enough atmosphere to slow you down slightly. And so over a year's time, you'll lose maybe 5 or 10% of your altitude from drag. And so anything in low Earth orbit either eventually re-enters or needs to have some boost to bring it back up to its operating altitude. So all those people who are operating in low Earth orbit are customers, potential customers, for propellant and water for life support. The metals we can use to build habitats in space. Because even with the new lower launch prices, it still costs a great deal of money to get anything into space. So the more we can supply from space resources, the less expensive it'll be to actually continue operating in space.
What makes the difference between resource mining here on Earth and in space?
The differences are technical and cultural, I guess. When the Earth was formed, 4.5 billion years ago, all of the metals melted and fell to the core of the Earth. And the crust that we mine is really metal poor. With asteroids, that melting and falling to the core never happened. And so they are actually much richer in metals on their surface than most any mine here on Earth. And so you have to think about them in a different way. They are just completely unlike the terrestrial situation where everything that we'd like to get our hands on, the iron and nickel, is thousands of kilometers beneath our feet and completely inaccessible. And only through processes like volcanism and circulation of water has brought up tiny amounts of that metal to the surface to be mined at great expense. We think that for mining asteroids, you also need to think of where are the markets that really need those things, and those markets are in space rather than back on the ground. It will be a long time before space resources are mined and brought back to the Earth's surface. In our plans, we'll mine the asteroids first for their water. We'll mine them next for the nickel and iron that they have to build things in space. And the leftovers will include the platinum group metals, platinum and palladium and gold and silver. And those leftovers, once we've done everything else, those might be valuable enough to bring down to the surface and used on Earth. But they won't be what we'll go after first. We'll go after things we can use in space. It's just a different way of thinking about what asteroids are good for.
Did I understand it correct that you want to use the resources in space, not here on Earth?
That's right. It still costs about $17 million a kilogram to get something up to high Earth orbit where the communication satellites are. That price, that value, is far higher than you could fetch for anything an asteroid has back on the ground. So, for example, communication satellites are launched with fuel to let them keep a precise position in geosynchronous orbit. When that fuel runs out after 10 to 15 years, even though the electronics are still working perfectly, they start to drift out of position and become useless. And so if you can refuel a communication satellite with propellant that you've harvested in space, it's worth $5 to $10 million a month per satellite to extend its life. And so there's a tremendous desire to be able to do things like that. Some of those satellite owners have it's just been revealed that they are willing to buy refueling services with propellant launched from the ground and brought up to the satellites. We will step in, 8 or 10 years from now with propellant mined locally at much lower cost. That's a market that exists now for asteroid resources. As we mine metals, we can do additional things for communication satellites. We can build bigger solar arrays for more power. We can build larger antennas so that they have more bandwidth. You can envision, once we get in operation, very large communication satellites so that anywhere on the planet you can have internet connection at fiber speeds, because the spacecraft, the satellites, are so much larger and have so much more power and larger antennas. That's would be a very revolutionary thing to happen, to be able to provide at any point on the planet the same speeds you would have if you had a fiber connection to your home.
When I think on disasters here on Earth, I mean, how can we manage resource mining in space?
Well, initially, most asteroid mining will be done robotically. We'll send out a spacecraft for perhaps a 3 to 5 year round trip to go to an asteroid, extract material, and bring it back to a parking orbit near Earth, somewhere in the Earth-Moon system. We'll process it there primarily robotically, but we'll probably have at least a few people around to fix the robots and to supervise the operation. I think that step will be fairly low risk. I don't think that the processing side will be dangerous. Mining is dangerous in part because we've gotten the easy stuff already. We have to now go after the hard things that are very deep, and you have to do a lot of blasting of rock to get at it. With asteroids, the good stuff is on the surface. We don't have to go to such lengths to get access to it.
How to manage that in a bigger scale?
Well, we're focusing on how to start. It may be that after some time there would be human crews sent out on the harvesting phase. It's surprising what people are willing to do and want to do. But at the beginning, we'd use robots to harvest the material because it's cheaper. It's a long trip usually to get to an asteroid. It's a year or 2 years, depending upon the asteroid. They're all individual in terms of how long it might take to reach them. And we've never done a space voyage with a human that's lasted, more than a couple of weeks with the Apollo crews. And the space station, where people have spent, say, 6 months to a year on the space station, that's a lot of hardware and resources in orbit to keep them alive. It would be very, very expensive to send that much mass out to an asteroid. So we just haven't yet mastered the technology of a compact habitat that can keep someone alive for the round trip of 3 to 5 years. That's one reason we haven't gone to Mars. We just don't know how to build machines that we can bet our life on to not break over a 5-year period. If something bad happens on the space station, the official response is to jump into the Soyuz lifeboat and come home. If they have a fire, they spend a little bit of time trying to put it out, but if it gets bad, they just leave. So if you're on a 5-year round trip, you can't leave. There's nowhere to go. So we are still at the very early stages of figuring out how to keep people alive and safe over that long a period.
Why should we start with resource mining in space? I mean, here on Earth, we can invest more in recycling, for example.
Well, the point of asteroid mining is not to supply things on Earth. The whole reason you would do it to start is to make living in space less expensive. It's similar to people saying you should buy your fruits and vegetables from a local farm. We want to buy our supplies locally in space instead of importing them from the ground at tremendous cost. So you should really think about asteroid mining as a way for humanity to be able to move out into the solar system and thrive with the resources they find at the destination, that they find in space, rather than bringing everything from the home country. Uh, you start to learn how to live off of what you find locally.
Is there a timeline from this vision until living in space?
Well, the timeline of our company, Deep Space Industries, is to launch the prospecting spacecraft in about 3 years, to launch the harvesting spacecraft in about 7 to 8 years, get them back in 8 to 10 years. And so 8 to 10 years from now, we hope to be producing fuel and water and metals in space for people who want to build up space activities. And I think you'll find there are other companies like Bigelow Aerospace that are building private space station habitats. Bigelow already has 2 small-scale habitats in orbit. They've been in orbit for several years. And at their Las Vegas headquarters, if you can get a pass, you can get in to see gigantic habitats that would, hold several large semi-trailer trucks. And he's got a launch reserved from SpaceX to put one of them in orbit in the next couple of years. So there is a lot of activity, not just from us, but from others, to build up a private commercial presence in space. And once that happens, you'll see a lot more successes. Governments are great to have built the International Space Station, but it's a difficult place to do business. When I produced the first TV commercial shot on the International Space Station, I couldn't use NASA to film the commercial. I had to go to Moscow and hire some cosmonauts because they were willing to take my money and shoot my commercial for me. And that's just, one example of how on a government space habitat, rules and regulations and procedures can get in the way. Whereas once we have the private habitats like Bigelow and others are building, all sorts of interesting ideas can prosper and flower.
What is your vision about living in space?
Well, personally, I think that most space colonies will be a mix of humans and robots. There are risky things that we'll have the robots doing. There are certainly ways for people to have a career in space without ever leaving the ground. They can become the operators, teleoperating robots. In low Earth orbit, there's only a few seconds lag, and so while you have a human up there doing things, you can also have a robot right next to him that's being controlled from the ground. That's doing things at a much lower cost than a human could. You can send that robot outside to the space station exterior to do things much more efficiently and than you can to suit up a human and get the human out there. So I think in the cities in space in the future, you'll have a mixed colony of humans and robots working side by side.
Open question. Is there anything left you want to talk about?
Well, I think the most important thing that's happening now is that companies and individual entrepreneurs are making their own decisions. They aren't all aligned to what their National Space Agency wants to happen. Elon Musk, for example, is building great rockets for the existing markets, but he also has got plans for rockets to send colonists to live on Mars. He hasn't asked for permission to do that. He's just doing that. And he's building a company that's making money that will probably make money on sending people to Mars to live. That that kind of activity is moving forward regardless, really, of what the government agencies decide to do. So instead of, in past decades, if you were pro-space, if you wanted something great to happen in space, you primarily would try to lobby your Congress and your politicians to get the space agency to go do something on your behalf. Now you can start a company and do it yourself. You can, in the United States, for example, there are, as I said, several billionaires building launch companies. There are people who are not billionaires, but just ordinary working people who are building companies to create spacesuits, companies to do suborbital space transportation like XCOR, which is a competitor to Virgin Galactic. And so that's in the spirit that we created Deep Space Industries. None of us are wealthy, but we have a great deal of expertise and a great deal of knowledge about what the markets are and what the technological capabilities are these days. And so we can go forth and create a company that will have an impact on the future of human space exploration.
Oh, your microphone.
Yeah. It's sliding down.
And sorry, one last master question. Which chances did the human have in space?
Well, one of the things that happened during the Apollo program is a famous picture of Earth from space. It showed the entire planet, and people saw there are no national boundaries. There are no dotted lines actually separating countries. They all flow into each other. They could also see things like the atmosphere was extremely thin. You know, it wasn't limitless. There were limits to the Earth's capacity, and that was called the overview effect. You know, being able to see the entire planet at once and how we were all on the same spaceship, essentially. I think as we expand into space, people will see more similarities among each other. There'll be more identification with the human race as our tribe. I think astronauts and cosmonauts probably think of each other as their own tribe, rather than I'm a Russian cosmonaut or American astronaut or Japanese astronaut. And I think a lot of what we do in space will have that kind of international orientation. And especially if we're off colonizing Mars on a private basis without, you know, a king or a queen or a government deciding that they're going to go do this, I think I have my fingers crossed that there'll be a more libertarian approach of we need just enough government to do the minimum policing and providing of common services, but not enough government to start wars and oppress people. But you know, we'll have to see. I've read that over the history of the human race, at least over the last 10 or 20 centuries, the amount of violence that people experience actually has been going down. That during the Middle Ages and earlier, there was basically mass slaughter from rampaging bands of Vikings and Visigoths and Mongols, deciding to create conquest. And just in personal life, you really weren't safe walking down your village street because someone could kill you. Society in general now, from what I've read, is in fact more peaceful than it's ever been, despite some of the wars that have broken out. So I have hope that people will will continue to believe that peace is the norm, peace is what we should expect, and that waging war will become less and less acceptable.
Oh wow, what you say in the last 2 or 3 minutes.
I know what we believe in our company, which is the peaceful utilization of space. We are an international company. We have Americans and several Australians as our founders. We think that there really are limitless resources in space. We think people should be viewing space in terms of abundance rather than scarcity. I think most of the scarcity that we have experienced on Earth has been, caused by governments. It's not the natural state. The most famines, for example, are caused by governments because they've interfered with markets. A few famines have been caused by weather and drought, but far more have been caused by governments deciding that there must be a particular price for wheat or corn, or the government's deciding that we're going to suddenly cut off imports or cut off exports, just fiddling around with markets, or deciding that we can no longer allow country A to supply country B. It's just been a horrible situation. So on the other hand, free enterprise and individual ingenuity has created fantastically better strains of rice and wheat that have produced a lot more food per acre than the previous strains. And overall, the amount of food available on a global basis has been going up. I really hope that when young people look at space and think in terms of abundance, it will replace all of the imagery that we now have of the future being very bleak, mostly some apocalyptic vision of burned out buildings and people scratching for scraps of food. I mean, unless governments cause wars or people with their home biology kits create plagues, the future can be very positive. There can be more for everyone. There doesn't have to be scarcity.
With every single breath, I am screaming out regret. All I have is only silence from you. And every day I wake and know your silence will invoke a cataclysm. I'm just being honest, but I will be patient with you. And all of your eccentricities are making ways and knowing how, with perfect lines that never correlate. I wanna shake your reason out, I wanna break